Okay, hi everybody, and today we are going to be talking about finding the mean of data, which is a topic in maths. Okay, finding the mean of the data, which is quite a weird sort of word for a maths topic, isn't it? The mean, especially if you've never heard it before. But we're going to talk all about it. We're going to talk all about the mean today. Make sure that we're brilliant at it. Make sure we understand what it is and why we use it, and then you will be completely familiar with it. All right. So let's start, guys. Let's talk about firstly what is the mean and why is it useful. Okay. So follow along with me, guys. Sometimes when we collect data, which we know is a fancy word for information. Yeah. Data just means I'm gonna write info because I'm cool. Sometimes when we collect information, we can be overwhelmed with it, right? So if imagine, right, that you've well, take a look at the second point. If you wanted to know the average, the typical size of a child in year 5, we might end up with too much data, right? Because we'd have to measure everybody. Think about a classroom of 30 students. Imagine having to measure all of them and then having all of these numbers to deal with. There's got to be a better way to figure out the average size of a year 5 student, right? So what the mean allows us to do, finding the mean allows us to look at this data and take from it just one value, and this value becomes the typical value, which helps to present the data as a whole. Now, if you're a bit confused at the moment, it's completely normal, right? Completely normal. But the point I'm making is, let's imagine that someone measures 160 centimeters, someone measures 140 centimeters, someone measures 152 centimeters, someone measures 171 centimeters. We've got all of these measurements going on, right? We want one value that kind of represents the entire class, yeah? So one value, and that's what the mean is, yeah? Okay, so let's do it. How do we do this? Let me show you. All right, so as usual, let me do this one all by myself. Even if you think you know how to do it, just let me do this one all by myself, and then we'll have some questions to do all by ourselves, okay? So this first question says, we've got a table, and it says that the table shows us the temperature at midday in London from the 20th of April to the 24th of April, right? So before we do anything, let's make sure we fully understand the table. It's telling us that on the April 20th, it was 70 degrees Celsius. On April 21st, it was 20 degrees Celsius. On April 22nd, 23 degrees Celsius. April 23rd, 18 degrees Celsius. And April 24th was 22 degrees Celsius, right? So imagine, right, that you had a friend phone you who didn't live in London. Maybe they lived in another country. They said to you, "Oh, what's the weather been like this week?" Rather than saying to them, "Well, it was 17 on April 20th and 20 on April 21st," what you might do is figure out like a typical value, a number that kind of represents the whole week, rather than lots and lots of information, just one number, right? So how do we find that? How do we find the mean of this data? Well, it tells us at the bottom. To find the mean, we need to add all the values together and divide by the total number of values, right? Don't worry if that isn't too clear. I'm going to do it right in front of you, right? So to find the mean, first step is add all the values together. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add all of these values together. This is all information, right? I'm going to add them all together. Now, we could add them mentally, couldn't we? I reckon the numbers are small enough that we might be able to add them mentally. But if you're not totally certain that you can do that, we'll just use the column method, yeah? So 23 is my largest one, 22, then I've got 20, then I've got 18, and then I've got 17. It's always good practice to add from largest to smallest, yeah? All right, so let's add the ones. 3 plus 2 is 5, plus 0 is still 5, plus 8 is 13, plus 7 is 20. So once I've added those ones, I get 20. Put the second digit underneath, and the first digit gets carried over. Then I've got 2 plus 2, which is 4, plus 2, which is 6, plus 1, which is 7, plus 1, which is 8, and then I've got the 2 that I carried over, so 8 plus 2 is 10. So I did that bit to find the mean, add all the values together. Well, I did that. I got 100. But then it says I've got to divide this by the total number of values. So my answer was 100, but I've now got to divide that by all of the values that I have. And I've got 5, haven't I? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 values. So the question becomes 100 divided by 5, which you can probably do in your head. And if you can't, just use the bus stop, right? But I reckon you can. So 5 into 10 goes twice. 5 into 0 goes 0 times. We have found our answer. The answer is 20 degrees Celsius. So now what that friend could say on the phone, that friend could say instead, right, rather than giving lots and lots of information, the friend could say, well, it's been about 20 degrees Celsius this week. She's now got like this average, this typical value to give to her friend. Okay, so that's how we find the mean. Now it's time to do it all by ourselves. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I leave the method at the bottom. So the method's right here. So if you do forget, it's right there. Okay. If it does go wrong, don't worry. We'll fix it together. But do try your hardest to get this right. Okay. So here's your question. It says Amanda scores 75% in her English test, 80% in her maths test, and 55% in her science test. Her teacher gives her a report card which shows her mean score across all 3 tests. What does the report card say? So pick from one of those options, guys. You don't have to write the answer out. Just write A, B, C, D, or E. Perfect, Chrissy. Perfect, Ava. Perfect, Oscar. Perfect, Ragnar. Perfect, Amanda. Perfect, Scarlett. Perfect, Jacob. Perfect, Alexa. Perfect, Himank. Perfect, Thomas. Perfect, Kiva. Right, if you wrote 210, it's not an option. There is no option that says 210, so you have to focus, guys. There's 5 options there. You need to pick one of those options. Perfect, Oki and Ari. Perfect, Uma. This is fantastic, guys. Really, really good, especially for a first question. All right, 15 seconds if you haven't answered, then we'll go through it together. All right, shall we go through it? Let's go through it. All right, so we've got Amanda, and she scores 75% in her English test, 80% in her maths test, and 55% in her science tests. And remember, when we're reading questions that have lots of words in them, it's always a good idea to just give it a quick underline, these numbers, yeah? We know they're going to be important to the question, so just underline them so you can see them clearer. Okay, now we're looking for the mean score across all 3 tests. So we're not looking for a score from each test, okay, although we do need those. We're more interested, or the report card is more interested, in one score that is typical across all 3 exams, the average of all 3 exams, the mean of all 3 exams, right? So how do we do it? We add all of the value together to begin with. So we've got 80 for the English, we have for the maths, 75 for the English, and 55 for the science. Again, you might be able to add this mentally. If you can, great. If you can't, don't risk it, guys. So 0 plus 5 is 10. Second digit goes underneath. First digit gets carried over. 8 plus 7 plus 5, that gives me 20. Plus 1, that gives me 21. So I've got my answer to the first bit. I've got the answer 210. But the second part of the question is asking me to divide this by the total number of values. This is where one or two of you got a bit confused, because one or two of you divided by 5 because that's what we did in the last question. But we're not supposed to divide by 5 every time. We're supposed to divide by the number of data entries, the data values that we have. We've got 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 210 divided by 3. Okay, 3 into 2. 3 doesn't go into 2. It goes in 0 times. So we're going to carry the 2 over. 3 into 21. That's 7. 3 times 7 is 21 with no remainder. 3 goes into 0. 0 times. I have my answer. This is the mean average, 70%. So the mean score is 70%. Okay. By the way, those of you that did mocks recently, this is exactly how I calculated your scores, right? I added your English to your maths, to your verbal, to your non-verbal reasoning, and I divided it by 4, and that was your overall score, which isn't exactly how it works, by the way. It's a little bit different in the actual exam, but it's not far off, okay? So, let's do another one. This time I'm not going to read it, okay? It's all down to you to read. So let me know. A, B, C, D. Actually, no, I do apologise. This one's not multiple choice. Okay? So you have to figure out the answer all by yourself. Give it a go, guys. Very good. Quid. Very good, Ava. Fantastic. Very good, Jacob. Very good, Ragnar. That's correct. Very good, Gersima. Perfect, Jordan. Perfect, Felita. Perfect, Joshua. This is brilliant, guys. There's a couple of incorrect answers. So if you've answered, I've not said your name. Take and have a look. Perfect, Chrissy. Perfect, Lucas. Perfect, Oscar. Perfect, Scarlett. All right, 10 seconds. Alright, if you answered and I never said your name, well done, Kiva, very good. Please don't worry too much about it, but do watch very closely. Watch very closely at what I'm about to do so that we can get the next one correct, alright? So it says a charity receives the following donations in one day: £120, £240, £200, £140. And then it asks us to find the mean of those donations, right? So first thing we're going to do is add them together. So we've got 240, then we've got 200, 140, and 120. So I'm going to add them together, okay? So let's add the ones. We've got 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, which of course is 0. Then we've got 4 plus 0 plus 4 plus 2, which is 10. So my second digit goes underneath, my first digit gets carried over. 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 is 6. Add the one that we carried over is 7. 6, 7. And we've got the answer 700. Okay, but we're not done, because the second step means that we've got to get our answer, which is 700, and divide it by the number of values that we added up. How many values did we add up? We added 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got to divide 700 by 4. Okay, so let's put 4 on the outside. How many times does 4 go into 7? Of course, it only goes in the one time. Now 4 times 1 is 4. We wanted to get to 7, so I have a remainder of 3. So that remainder goes in front of the next number. How many times does 4 go into 30? Let's do this really carefully. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. It goes in 7 times. Now 7 times 4 is 28. We wanted to get to 30, so I've got a 2 remainder. So that goes in front of the next number, which becomes 20. How many times does 4 go into 20? It goes 5 times. No remainder, so that's my answer. My answer is £175. That's the average, the mean amount. By the way, when you're doing questions like this in the exam, right? When you get your answer, what you should do is have a look to see if it looks sensible, if it looks reasonable. Like, if I'm trying to find a number that like kind of resembles all of those, represents all of those, then when I think about the number 175, it kind of does. I feel like it must be correct because we can see it would float around the middle because 240 is higher, 120 is lower. So 175 does seem reasonable. It seems sensible. If my answer, right, was something like, I don't know, let's say £30, we know that wouldn't be correct. We know something must have gone wrong because it's way lower than all of these. So how can it possibly be an average? How can it possibly sort of represent all 4 of those numbers? So it's just a good sort of tip there. When you're doing mean, just take a look at your answer. Does it look reasonable? If you've done all the working out and it looks reasonable, it's going to be correct, isn't it? All right, well done, guys. Let's look at the next question. So once again, could you read it by yourself and let me know what you think the answer is? No multiple choice, guys. Just send to me the answer. Scarlett, you are amazing. Very good, very quick. Amazing, Chrissy. Perfect, Era. Perfect, Oscar. Very good, Thomas. Perfect, Alexa. Perfect, Jordan. Perfect, Jacob. Perfect, Theo. Well done, Gessima. I think, guys, the trick here is not the trick, but the thing to avoid here is when we add those numbers up, 10 and 8 and 12, they're not tricky, are they? It's not tricky to add those numbers up. They're quite small, but because we're adding lots of numbers up, it can become tricky because we've got a lot flying about in our head quite quickly. So do make sure that when you're adding, you're very careful. It doesn't mean to be slow, just be careful, yeah? Well done, Ragnar. Try not to give me 2 answers, guys. Send to me just 1 answer. Perfect, George. Perfect, Jordan. All right, 10 seconds. All right, let's go through it, guys. So let's do a joint effort here. Let's do a joint effort. So we'll start with Ava. She's top of the list. So Ava, could you do me a favour and add these 5 up?
What?
20.
I'm not going to aim it out saying, but I might just say
60.
Perfect. Perfect. 60 pounds. Okay. Era. could you add the next 5 up?
£80.
Amazing, 80. So Ragnar, Ava calculated £60. Era calculated £80. What's the total?
£140.
Perfect. Well done, guys. Good counting. And you know what? Like, it's as human beings. I know I say it's quite a lot. Believe it or not, these are the questions that go wrong most. Because even though the numbers aren't high, it's just because there's a lot of information, and sometimes we struggle to deal with a lot at one time. That's why I'm breaking it up in front of you. Yeah. So we had 60, then we had 80. So we've got £140, right? And that's the total of all of the money that the children brought to the museum. Jacob, what do we need to do with £140?
Divide it by, since there's the amount of people, which is 10, can I say
Yeah,
14?
perfect. Well done,
So
Jacob.
the answer is 14. The
Um,
average score is 14.
the average score.
No, yeah, the average money, not score.
Good. The mean. Good. Well done, Jacob. The mean of the money. It's tempting to say average, but there are many types of average, so it's a bit annoying that we have to kind of say mean average or just mean. So as Jacob said, the mean is 140 divided by 10, which is £14. So once again, is it reasonable? Is it sensible that £14 could be correct? I think so, because look, we've got £10, £8, £12, £20. We know that 14 kind of floats about in the middle of those, and then we've got 10 and 15. 14 floats between those, 5 and 20. Yeah, so we've got. It looks fine. Okay, it looks good. If you've got the answer £140, you'd know to question it, because how can that be the average when the highest amount that was brought is Williams, which is 30? The average is supposed to, the mean average, sorry, is supposed to give us a good representation of what the average person brought, right? And 14 does look reasonable. All right, amazing. Let's go to the next one. Mr. Smith compares the prices of bread in 3 different supermarkets. In Mawson's, it costs £1.25. In Sainsbury's, it costs £1.05. And in Tesco, it costs 91p. Can you calculate the mean price of the bread across the 3 supermarkets? All right, perfect, Ava. Very good, and very good units of measurement. We're measuring in pounds. Perfect, Chrissy. Perfect, Jacob. Perfect, Oscar. Perfect, Scarlett. Perfect, Joshua. Perfect, Lucas. Perfect, Oki and Ari. Just try your best to get that decimal point in there, but good. The numbers are fine. Perfect, George. Perfect, Kiva. Perfect, Jordan. Perfect, Gesima. Some of you are so close, but I can't say your name because I want you to check your answer. Perfect, Himank. All right, shall we go through it? Perfect, Amanda. Perfect, Oki and Ari. Good. All right, let's go through this question. All right, let's go to George. George, how am I going to start answering this question? What do I need to do to begin with? George, are you there?
Do you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, I just had to switch my microphone. First you have to add all of the costs of the bread.
What do you want? What method should I use? Column method, or should I just add it mentally? What are you thinking? What did you do?
I did column method, but I added all of them in one big column.
All right, let's do that. So £1.5, and then I've got our place values right. So we've got £0, and we've got 9t, so 9 tens and 1. All right, now what?
Now you add them and you get £3. Yeah. 1 and then 2 points and then 3. So £3.21.
Cents?
Yeah, isn't that it?
Bless you. Okay, let's call it cents. I mean, in this country, we'll say pence. Yeah, 21 pence.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You watch a lot of American TV shows, George. All right, George, what do we do next? So we've got £3.21. What are we dividing it by?
3.
Okay.
So 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 goes into 2, 0. Now the 2 we give it to the 1, so now it's 21. And 3 goes into 21 7 times, as 7 times 3 is 21.
Amazing. Well done, George. Perfect. Well explained. So that's our answer, guys. £1.7. Now, because we're focusing on mean, there's a couple of things that have happened during this lesson that might confuse you, that we can't talk about because we're talking about the mean and we don't have enough time to talk about everything. For example, it might be that you don't know how to use a bus stop method, right? And if you don't, just check the YouTube channel or check the website. There'll be a video on it. Or maybe you can't do the addition. The point I'm making, guys, is we can't talk about all of the processes. When all we're talking about today is what the mean is and how we find the mean. So if it is the division or it is the addition that you find tricky, that's okay, but do practice it, okay? All right, this brings us on to... Oh no, it brings us to the end. I thought there was one more, but there isn't. Okay, no worries. So before we finish, guys, could you do me a favour and in the chat box, could you give yourself a number out of 10? How do you feel about the mean, finding the mean of data?